Hey, y'all. On today's podcast, we welcome back Mark to celebrate his success and help him determine his next steps.
Welcome to the Flip Lifestyle Podcast, where life always comes before work. We're your hosts, Shane and Jocelyn Sams. We're a real family that figured out how to make our entire living online. And now, we help other families do the same. Are you ready to flip your life? All right, let's get started. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Flipped Lifestyle Podcast. It is great to be back with you again today. Really excited about today's guest. This is someone who has been on the Flipped Lifestyle Podcast before. It's someone we have met in person at one of our Flip Your Life live events, and it's someone who is doing some amazing things in the online business world. Our guest today is Mark Taylor. Mark, welcome back.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me back on the show.
Now, remind everybody where you live at, because it's definitely not Kentucky from the sound of your accent. You know what I'm saying?
It's not. It is the UK, but it's not the University of Kentucky, which I think was what we were talking about last time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I live in a village called Rode, which is about 60 miles just north of London over here in Great Britain.
I think it's amazing that you live in a village. We don't have villages. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
we got like towns. I wish we had villages.
Definitely not use that word, village. But I am quite obsessed with the UK, actually. I think we might have talked about this before. I've actually traveled there once, and I would love to go back again sometime.
I think we're going to come soon, Mark, because they're about to pass all those laws
about the visas.
Where we got to have visas now, the United States people to go to the EU. But I know England's going to let us in once they get out of there. They Brexit it, right? They're Brexiting.
Absolutely. I think everyone will be welcome.
So we'll just go to England. We'll just hang out with you.
Yeah. So I love British culture. Like I'm kind of obsessed with it. I'm a big tea drinker. I drink English breakfast every morning. So, I feel like I have a real kinship with you.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I do the morning breakfast, followed by the mid-morning breakfast, followed by lunch, followed by afternoon.
Second breakfast, third breakfast, and tea.
For sure.
And there's tea.
Yeah, and believe it or not, I mean, Southerners, we are big tea drinkers. It's more iced tea usually, but I do drink a lot of hot tea. So,
yeah, love it.
All right. Well, let's jump into a little bit of background for the listeners. For people who maybe have not listened to podcasts with you on it before, tell everybody a little bit about you, about your background, and what you've been doing online.
So I obviously live here in the UK. My background's in music. My passion is music. I'm a professional musician, moved to London and went to music college and studied there. And I've had the great honour really to play with many of the UK's leading orchestras and organisations. And through that, I've had the opportunity then to become an educator, teaching drums, teaching music, and played all over the world and extensively, obviously, through the UK. And what's been really exciting is I've been able to sort of transfer that passion into my online world through Education on Fire. So I live here with my wife, and we've got 3 children, and we have a really lovely life. We talk a lot on the podcast about the ability to sort of have that sort of balance in life. And I've kind of always had that. My wife and I decided always that we wanted to sort of split the childcare and actually spend a lot of time, and we've always managed to do that. Being freelance and a musician means that we have a little bit of control of our schedule. But of course, if you're not actually away touring or you're not away working, then you don't quite have the financial freedom that you might have, which is where some of the online ideas came from in terms of trying to monetize the sorts of things that I was doing. So yeah, so my life really sort of fits into that three pattern really. It's music playing, music educating, and then the music and the online education through Education on Fire.
I love the last time you were here, which was, what was that podcast?
It's 189.
All right. For those of you who want to catch that episode, it's at flippedlifestyle.com/podcast 189. But we talked a lot about your podcast, Education on Fire. Now, at that time, it was more just a passion project, right? It was just something almost like a hobby that you were doing because you had something in your life going on that you really wanted to get involved in the education space, correct?
That's exactly it. Yeah. I mean, I had 3 children going through different parts of the education world. And as we know in the media and that kind of thing, education's got a bit of a downer at the minute. There's lots of testing, lots of people taking their kids out of school and homeschooling. It's just that you're not quite sure how it fits in with the modern world. And the passion project really came from the fact that because I was going into schools delivering music workshops, I was also seeing some fantastic teaching going on, some fantastic ideas and things being very creative. And what I wanted to do was just really to flip that slightly, and just the podcast came out of I want to share inspiring creative ideas that people were actually doing. So yeah, it was literally a passion project just to support my kids and to support other teachers and people involved in education to kind of feel like, oh, there's great stuff going on over there. Maybe I can copy that. Maybe I can replicate some of these things and actually make my school a different environment based on what I'm hearing from other places.
Yeah. And but like all passion projects, they take time, right? And there eventually comes a point where you're like, okay, if I'm going to be putting so much time into this, then we need to monetize it. We need to figure out like, okay, well, how can this not only support the passion, not only support the listeners, and not only support the kids, but how can it support me and my family a little bit better? And that's kind of the gist of the last episode. So we talked about that. Tell us a little bit about what's happened since episode 189 when you came on. Like, what did you do differently after that episode, and how have you grown the original podcast?
So it was really your input and your suggestions of kind of, I wasn't sure what to do, where to head, even where to structure my thought, really. And you said, speak to your audience, see what it is that they need, see who they are, which is something I found really interesting because I thought, well, of course, they're teachers, they're people working in schools. And so I did exactly that. I tried to get some information, ask some people who were listening that I knew, and they said, well, actually, some of us are teachers, but actually some of us are parents. And actually, I really enjoyed sharing some of this stuff with my adolescent children because actually they're struggling sometimes, and actually we're quite interested in the fact that you're talking slightly differently. You're talking about things that are outside the box or things which aren't sort of restrictive. We're talking about being creative and inspiring. And so I thought, well, that's really interesting, but, what do I do from there? I could create the odd bonus episode, but my Education on Fire podcast, as it originally was like themed seasons, so if I was talking about English or talking about PE, I wasn't quite sure how I was going to fit that in by the odd extra episode. So luckily, the platform that I was using, I was chatting to them about it, and they said, well, you can have a separate feed, and why don't you actually niche down even more and actually create more than one podcast? And so out of that came Learning on Fire, where I basically share conversations with people who are successful partly, but really about living life on their terms. They're fulfilled in what it is that they're doing. And some of those interviews are multimillionaires, and some of them are actually just people living their dream, doing everything in a very small way, but they've actually found a way of creating the life that they want. And so just through a sort of series of questions and a conversation, we get to hear a running theme often about people following their passions, the sort of advice they've been given, exactly where their journeys went, actually, whether it was in the straight line, which of course we know is very rarely the case, and it just sort of veered off. And so from that, this sort of brand new podcast opened up, and I essentially just found myself running a network of two podcasts.
You accidentally started a podcast network. That's. Yeah. I don't think anyone's ever done that on the show, man. You just accidentally fell into that. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. I just thought that running one podcast was so much work that the easiest thing to do is to start another one.
Right. Exactly. It's so simple.
Totally logical.
Yeah, we've had to do that in the past too, though. Like we've had one thing we started doing, especially on our YouTube channel, fliplifestyle.com/YouTube, take you right there on the redirect. But we actually had to divide up a lot of our stuff a little bit because Flip Lifestyle is very much like helping people, start podcasts, start their content, start their business, like do the next level things. And we thought that the travel stuff would complement it, right? But we found the people that were watching our travel videos were not always interested in the entrepreneurial space. So we actually recategorized the place on our blog just for those. Our YouTube videos, it's got like its own playlist where we just put all the travel review videos. And we really don't even talk about those much on the show because, it's related enough and you think it's related enough. But like you were saying, man, maybe I'll throw in an extra episode for two different segments. And you realize, nope, I'm just going to start this over here and go a different direction. And once you get your workflow, it's not that bad, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because it sort of, I think inside my mind, I went from being just sort of a passion project and doing something on the side to people suddenly taking a bit of notice and saying, well, you've got a network, so therefore you must have something to say. And of course, as soon as you start generating more podcasts and there's more show notes and more blog posts, all of a sudden your website looks quite authoritative. Right. And all I was doing was the same stuff. All I loved doing is chatting to people and sharing their stories. And so it grew and grew and grew. And I was really lucky at the same sort of time I was involved in a charity called the National Association for Primary Education. And I loved being involved in that because not only are they trying to support teachers and parents and everyone involved in education really from birth to 13, they also have because they're a national organization, they do have conversations with ministers. They have a certain amount of influence, as much as anyone does, on kind of policy and where education was going. And then I thought, this is great because I'm actually able to talk at that level. I'm also able then to talk to teachers and schools. And now I've got this Learning on File podcast, which is for parents and their kids. And then they were just wanting to grow their audience, their membership. They wanted to get their message out there. And they said, well, you're already doing this kind of thing. And I said, well, yeah, I am really. And I said, well, why don't we just combine the whole thing? So 2 was fine, but why not have a podcast network of 3? So I said, well, let me produce a podcast for you. And then we've got all these things then running through this network. And then they said, well, that's great. And I said, it's quite a big time commitment. And it's really going to need some professionalism, really, just to make sure we can keep the regularity and the quality going. And they said, great, well, how about we sponsor the whole network, and then we can get our message out through the stuff you're already doing. And then you've also got our individual message by the podcast you're producing specifically for us. So Education on Fire effectively then became a 3 podcast network, all in the space of a few months, really. And then it's almost like a full-time job, but also it's part of my professional playing and my teaching as well.
That's incredible. And it's awesome because really this all came from just a discussion, a simple question like, I'm doing something, I'm creating something. How can I make this something that becomes professional and makes money? Well, you grow your audience, you get multiple channels, multiple segments, a big organization takes notice, and they're willing to give you money to be the advertiser on the show. And now you get to make cash from doing this podcast, which is incredible. Right. So tell us a little bit more. Now you came to Flip Your Life Live last year. You won the award for the longest traveled person. I think it was no, it wasn't. No, it was really close. There were some Australians. So we had some Australians. We had some, you were from England. So you were the European representative at Flip Your Life Live last year. And, but you had some things that were going on before that. Like, how did that play into getting the sponsorship and professionalizing this network to where you are making money for podcast? You're talking about living the dream. You're getting paid to podcast. That's pretty incredible.
To talk about something that you love talking about.
That's right.
Is really cool.
Exactly. So how did that play into everything?
Well, I think part of it is like you said, it was a passion project that moved in, and what's really exciting is I was kind of doing what I was talking about, which is that you don't know where these things are going to head. Follow your dream, follow your passion, and see what happens. And I was getting to meet so many amazing people. And what Flip Your Life Live really did for me was the fact that it just made me think about how you can combine the two. It's not like if it's a passion project, that's okay, but you don't really talk about it, or your professional life is like this and you don't really talk about it. It was the fact that there were so many similarities in everything that was going on, in terms of, well, if I want to grow my audience, I want to do this. If I'm thinking about email marketing, if I'm thinking about social media, I'm thinking about how to build a community, and all these things were going on within Flip Your Life. And then through the live events and all the prerequisites that you were doing, it was like, I suddenly start to see how it's about relationships, how it's about bringing people together, how it's about just getting that message out there, and actually how you do that. And so, it was that kind of those skills that I was learning that I was then able to speak to the National Association and say, look, I understand what it is that you're trying to do, and I think we can do this, 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 and this. And I think actually that's going to make a difference to what you're doing. There's no guarantees. We don't actually know. But I was able to articulate it in such a way by talking in the way that we've been doing and how we've been chatting within the community, and certainly on those Zoom calls, and just be able to think, oh, actually, I really understand it. I can actually see it. And because I now understand it, I can get that message across. And they jumped on board and said, that sounds great. We've got no idea how to do that, but you're already doing it. Let's go for it. And so, it really is just that sense of the skills that you need to actually create a thriving business, whatever that happens to be, whether it's online or not, actually are often the same in many ways.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like that, what Mark's talking about here is our live event works really, really differently than other conferences. We actually have weekly now. Well, we did monthly trainings, I think, the first year that we did Flip Your Life Live. And then now we're doing weekly prerequisite trainings where I am personally guiding people with accountability through the Flip Your Life Blueprint. We get deep into like marketing, how to talk to your potential client. Like your potential client was this charity, right? Like they wanted to sponsor your podcast. Like selling an ad is no different than selling a shirt or selling a digital course, right? Like how you market that, how you present that, building community around it. And in the modern world, if you're not building a community around what you do, you're not going to have a sustainable business. Why do you think 50 million people watched Game of Thrones last week? Right? Because they've built this community around this show, around their network. And that's what you're doing there. So, I'm just glad that all this like has blown up, man, because like you're one of the nicest people we have ever met. And you're like just a great guy. And like, a lot of people say they have a passion, but I've always felt like you really are truly in-depth, passionate about this topic. I mean, and even you were an overnight success because you got this sponsorship and it started paying substantial money each month to be able to sponsor your show. But like you built these 2 podcasts and you got deep with your audience and you communicated with them even before it was monetized. And how long did you do the podcast before you made this sponsor agreement with the network?
Oh, it must have been. I think I launched originally in December 2016. 2016. That's right. And then the sponsorship came through just as we were going to Nashville. So that was sort of August, September 2018. So it was a good 18 months or so.
And so you're an 18-month overnight success.
How does that make you feel, Mark?
How does that make you feel? You know what I mean? Like everybody else is looking in and being like, wow, you met the right guy at a party and got a sponsorship in one day for podcasting. And like you're like, no, that is not what happened. That is not true.
Yeah, I think maybe I'm getting better, though, because it was like a 10-year success to become a professional musician. So maybe I'm getting the hang of it a bit better.
Hey, once you do it once, you can do the next thing faster. That's what we always say, right?
Yeah, for sure.
We always, when people come into the community, sometimes they'll say like, boy, this is a lot of work and I just don't know if I'm going to, what if I put in all this work and I don't make it? And we're like, well, at least you learned all the skills. Yeah, what if you do make it, right? But at least you learned all the skills, so your next pass is a month instead of a year when you try to build something new.
Okay, Mark, it's been really exciting watching your journey so far, and we're just really proud of you, and I can't wait to see what is next. And with that in mind, let's start talking a little bit about how we can help you to grow to the next level you would like to get to.
Yeah, so having been to the live event, and I really sort of had a really good think about what it was that I wanted to do, what I wanted to focus on, and of course, keeping that passion going as well. And being a musician, I decided that I was going to create something music related. And the one thing I'm always really grateful for is the fact there was so much music going on in my school that without that, I just wouldn't have even had the opportunity. So I wanted to do something to support teachers, and certainly here in the UK, there's a lot of places where they have to teach music, but they're not particularly trained, and primary teachers here have to do across the whole curriculum, and it's really quite scary and fearful to sort of suddenly have 30 kids with instruments and know what to do with it. So I decided I'd sort of combine the passion and my expertise, and I've created Primary Music on Fire, which is really that initial sort of hand-holding teachers into the first things that they can do when they want to do music, and giving them some resources and a community where they can sort of come together and sort of just take the fear out of exactly what those initial stages are. And that launched in February this year, and we've had a few members come in. We had one member join before it even launched. I managed to do all the marketing in the way that we talked about in Nashville, and amazingly it worked even before the launch day.
It's amazing what happens when you take action on what we say on stage. I tell everybody that, like, because we had people making sales in the room at that day, like during sessions. People are like, I just made a sale because I did that last slide, right? And it's like, when you do it, it's crazy what can happen.
Yeah, it really is, and it was just amazing. It was that kind of and that immediate result, which, like you say, sometimes the overnight success takes many months or years, and even though it had taken me a few months to put the whole thing together and to kind of work it out and get all the tech in place, I felt like it was a natural progression because it was still under the Education on Fire brand, and I was able to sort of tag everything within the website, and I just thought it was a way of me. I've been talking about creative and inspiring things and following your passion, and I thought, well, this is a way for me to say, hi, I'm a musician and I'm a music educator. This is me doing my passion stuff where I can actually give you direct access to me and also a community and the skills that you'd need just to do that. And it can be just as simple as kind of, right, you're really scared about doing music tomorrow, come in, sit the kids in a circle. Here's a whole load of rhythm games you can do, which over the 20 years or so I've been doing it, I know they love, and they get so much stuff, and I can talk about how you put that into the curriculum and various things. So it's really exciting. We've had a few members in there. We've done a beta launch and just make sure everything works, which it is. And so now I'm literally thinking, right, how do I move this forward? How do I get more people in? How do we get people excited about it and start to grow it?
Okay, so in terms of monetization, like what is going on right now? You have the membership, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and you've officially launched that to your podcast and to your email list?
Yeah, are you putting who did you launch this to? Just people who raised their hand that they were interested?
Yeah, and initially it was the people that I'd had on my email list to say, look, this is coming up, and people that had been listening to the podcast. And then I did a short podcast season, just basically counting down to the fact it was going to be live and people who wanted to be involved. And that's where I got my first few people in from. And so now I'm sort of comfortable that I kind of know how it works, the sort of things that are going to happen. I'm ready to sort of open it out even more. And I did start to do a few Facebook ads, which worked really well, grew the email list a little bit. So that seemed to be working well. And now I can sort of just sit back and see if I can tweak a few things with that and just decide where to go from there. Because one of the interesting things was the fact that when I started to talk about this with people, they were saying, oh, that would work great actually in my school. And then I had some other people through the podcast saying, oh, but I'm a homeschooler and actually I'd really like to learn the ukulele because I could actually do this and learn it with my kids. And the other thing I can do is I can then learn a little bit of the basic music stuff. So I don't need to get an expert into my house to teach it one-on-one. I can actually do it online. And yes. I thought that was great because they came to me to talk about that and it's suddenly taken me in a whole different direction. So I'm thinking maybe doing a 5-day challenge to learn the ukulele. I've got someone who does this locally and we've got a few videos that we're working on and just sort of get that going, and then we can incorporate that into the membership as well.
How much are you charging a month for the membership right now?
Well, this is the big thing, is that at the moment all we're charging is $4.99 a month. And
is that pounds or USD? What are we talking about here?
It's pounds, but it doesn't make that much difference.
That's right.
And the reason behind that was because there are organisations and there are things out there which charge even the most full kind of membership or place where you can get content for music over here are around $250, maybe $300 a year. It's not a massive market, and school budgets are what they are. And so what we found when people were asking us about it was often the teachers saying, look, we don't know what to do, but we want to do something. And they were going to put their hands in their pocket to do it.
Right.
So it was really testing the water to see whether actually for the price of a cup of coffee, you could get someone in to see it and then start to grow it from there. And I wanted to start it small enough that we could just test it and get people to go. I fully expect it to go up, but I don't know how much that'll be for.
For sure. And you can do a series of raises, like you can go $9, $14. So you can see how far you can push it before sales stop, and then you just dial back one. You know what I mean? We're homeschoolers, and like we usually look for like resources that are in that $10 a month range, because like we sign up for like one called, what's it called? Reflex?
Yeah.
Reflex Math. Like it's like math games. There's another one coming out like next month called like Adventure Academy we're looking at to give kids like that supplemental thing. But like, because, as a homeschooler, that stuff adds up. I mean, if you're doing a math one and a science one and a music one and an English one, like all of a sudden you're paying $50 a month on $5 a month thing, right? Yeah. So I think it is smart to keep it low because, the market's infinite. It's the schools, it's the teachers, it's the homeschool market. Like you've got a ton of people. You're only going to need, if you get 1,000 people in the world to do this thing, right? Then that's still $4,000 or $5,000 extra dollars a month on top of what you're already doing, basically.
Yeah.
And I feel like with your experience with the sponsorships, like you might even be able to get people to come in and do sponsorships on the site. A lot of times people who do lower cost recurring revenue models, they will supplement with advertising, other people advertising on their platform. So maybe it's companies who sell to educators who might be interested in doing that, if that's something that you might be interested in bringing in to supplement that.
Or even like instrument companies, or, you partner with somebody and they, if you can grow this thing to 1,000 people, right? Then you tell the ukulele company, hey, why don't you be the official ukulele of Primary Music on Fire? I'm in all these schools. I got all these teachers. And then all of a sudden they're like, yeah, we'll do that for another couple $100 a month. And they're like, so basically at the beginning of your lesson, like I got my, what's it called? Acme ukulele here, whatever. You just give a little pitch. It's almost like a product placement. You know what I'm saying? Like it's unlimited, like how much you can do with it once you get inside.
Yeah, and you don't want it to be a total pitch fest the whole time. Like I hate it when I pay for something and there's still like super intrusive ads. I don't like that. But I feel like if you can kind of say to people, okay, I play this particular instrument, I really like it. I do get an affiliate commission from this if you purchase it, but it costs you no extra and it helps to support the site. I'm okay with that.
Like tying that back into your sponsorships. Let me ask you this. So currently you have a sponsorship with this one company for your podcast. Is that exclusive? Is that completely exclusive?
It's exclusive for the first year. Amazingly, they wanted to do this for the long haul, which I'm really pleased about because the organisation needed a bit of a support from a tech point of view. So I've sort of helped them do that as well. And so I said it's going to need time to grow. So they're an exclusive sponsor for this first year, which will finish in the summer. But then as they start to bring their sponsorship level back a little bit, the agreement is that I can then open it up to new sponsors as well. So yeah, it does suddenly infinitely give me more and more opportunities. And one of the great things I like about the idea of the instrument sponsorship idea is that I'd thought not so much about the affiliate thing a little bit more because it's actually such a low entry level. I thought actually that kind of being able to promote resources that I use all the time in schools would be a good way of doing that and actually having a bit of an affiliate income coming through that. But actually having a specific sponsor for various things that we're doing is a brilliant idea.
Yeah, like if you had if the drum lesson was $100 a month, and then you had the guitar ukulele was $100 a month, and then something else was like all that kind of adds up over time. So let me ask you this: you said you promoted this Primary Music on Fire though within the network, correct? So even though they're the exclusive title sponsor that's paying you this, 4-figure a month income, right? Like you still promoted Primary on Fire on your podcast, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So the National Association for Primary Education, they're the official sponsor. They're the ones that are sort of the guiding light at the moment for this year. But I was still able to bring Primary Music on Fire there as my own kind of sponsor, as it were, just to show that was the case. And so I've got a few outro sponsorships that I can do for that. And it's quite prominent on my site as well. And I think a lot of that feeds itself because I've got people coming into one part of the podcast listening about English, and then they're thinking, oh, there's a bit of music there, and I think that sort of cross promotion seems to work quite well.
Well, see, I would talk to your sponsor about this too, but they seem to be okay with you promoting your own stuff, right? Like not as an external sponsor. And I would really start thinking if you want to really grow Primary Music on Fire, and at the same time prepare for the big revenue increase, which is when your exclusivity ends, and you can go out and basically find 3 more title sponsors at that price, and then work out where you put your spots in the show to be able to advertise all these things. Because like that, once that ends, which is this summer in a few months, like you're literally going to be able to go out and find 2 or 3 more sponsors, and boom, your income is going to triple just like that, right? But the real growth is if you can put 5,000 people in your membership. Like that's huge. So you could go ahead and start working within that framework that you're already in right now, and really formalizing where ad spots go, not just the title sponsor. Where do you read them at? Do you talk about them at the beginning, or what do you do? Okay.
Yeah, it's really at the beginning, a little tag at the end, and then they're on the show notes.
Okay, perfect. So what you need to do is leave them at the beginning right now because they're the exclusive sponsor. I would dedicate a whole middle spot to Primary Education on Fire every week, and maybe give out a free lesson to get the opt-in, right? Mm-hmm. And then I would probably formalize the ending into less of a throwaway, oh, don't forget our title sponsor. Like that's a third commercial spot, basically. And you really treat it like an official place, because what's going to happen is whoever, basically you're going to go bid out the next sponsor. And if they pay more, they become the front sponsor, right? Your thing goes in the middle, and whoever's left goes on the end, or wherever you want to put them. It doesn't, and you can even rotate them through the different shows. Like, every sponsor doesn't get every single episode. It's more like, okay, this package include, like we're doing 1 a week for 3 shows, right? So like this package includes 10 spots, right? So you may have a total, if you do 3, 4, 12, you may have a total of 12 spots, and they can buy a package of 6 or 10 or whatever. That's where the real money is going to come from. But you can go ahead and start practicing this now and put 2 spots in for Primary Music on Fire every single episode. And I bet you can go ahead and start pouring more of these, next level beta members in to really push the ramp up. Like you could even go ahead and raise your price and try it now, and just use that as a commercial. Like treat it like a sponsor is paying you to do that spot. Don't just mention it like, hey, I'm launching this other thing. And that's how you instantly start getting more people to know, because this is just an awareness thing. You got 3 podcasts that people are actually listening to, right? So like every podcast, they just need to know about the ways that they can pay you, and you're going to be off to the races with that. What do you think?
I think that's great. And interestingly, it feels exactly the same as when I finished the podcast we did before. It's that kind of, oh yeah, it's taken me to like a new professional level in that kind of the way you're thinking about that and actually placing it and feeling like every bit has its own place and how you utilize that. And interestingly, one thing which I thought was a negative a little while ago is I started to have marketing people contact me and say, I've got so-and-so wants to come on your show. And I was like, I'm not quite sure if they're an exact fit. But having got some on, they've been brilliant guests and they've really sort of bought into the whole ethos of what I was doing. And a lot of those people are working with companies who've got things that they want to promote. So it sort of feels like there's going to be a natural progression and a way of working with these people going forward. And I think the sponsorship idea, like you say, once it starts to really feel like it's something they can get into, will be a fantastic one.
And you can, but the key is right now, treat Primary on Fire. Imagine Primary on Fire is led by the CEO, Mark Taylor, and another Mark Taylor is running the podcast network. And you're literally have made a deal with Primary Music on Fire, just like you did with this charity, to be a title sponsor. Now, how would you treat that ad spot now? You wouldn't treat it as, Mark, I got this new thing. I'd like for you to try it. If you're interested, you can, if you want to, go email, whatever. It's no like, and remember, today's episode is also brought to you by Primary Music on Fire, another part of the network, right? Another thing that you do you advertise your other shows on each show? Do you do that?
Not on each show. I've kind of got better at kind of cross promoting it in a more natural way throughout the conversations. So that's been a bit better. And I've occasionally done the odd specific show just to say, and of course I'm doing this, and this, but actually not as an official sort of short pitch on each episode.
I would formalize that process because that's the power of a podcast network. That's where the leverage actually comes from. Every podcast in the network promotes every other podcast in the network, which grows every other podcast in the network. And that way you have more leverage when you're negotiating these advertising fees, right? And then try to figure out a way to get 3 to 4 spots in. Maybe one of the spots is to promote one of your other shows. Don't forget, we also do Education on Fire. If you're an educator or educator, go do this. Advertise your own thing, and then you can have 2 title sponsors. Your prices will probably go up as the audience goes up, right? And all of a sudden you're looking down and you may have a 5-figure podcast instead of a 4-figure podcast, just like that.
Yeah, I think that's great. And it's perfect timing, I think, because like I said, I've got probably another sort of 3 or 4 months at the most before the exclusivity finishes. And if I start thinking about putting those foundations in place now, I can really hone that ready to open the doors later on in the summer.
You should start finding advertisers right now, even though you can't advertise them yet. You don't want to wait until you can lose the exclusivity. You want to have it ready to go out the gate. You know what I'm saying?
That's fantastic.
Because then all the negotiations done, the contracts are signed, you have a start date, it's all good to go, right?
Brilliant.
How else have you decided to monetize the podcast?
So those are the main the main ways at the moment. I did wonder, because I've had so much positive feedback from parents through the Learning on Fire podcast, because they're just wanting to support their teenagers. They know the sorts of angst that they go through. They know how difficult it is to impart what we deem to be really great information, the sorts of things. I always think of it as if it's really a half an hour conversation where you're trying to give all the great advice and things that you've learned to your children in one go. It's that kind of sort of fireside sit-down chat, but we know in reality, certainly with 2 teenagers in our house, it's very difficult to have those conversations sometimes. And I was chatting to someone the other day and they were like, yeah, it's almost like what we want to be doing is we want to be sitting in the car listening to the podcast. A few things get brought up and then the conversations just start to come. And, I hadn't thought of that. Oh yeah, I read that book, or I listened to that podcast, and that advice that was given to me by a mentor that I was doing. That's brilliant. How does that work? And then they were just sort of saying it's much more natural feel. And so I wonder whether sort of creating something like Patreon or including something like that might be a way of being able to give my audience a chance to sort of buy into what I'm doing, because I really feel like they're really feeling like it's something that they want to be able to support their children with.
Yeah, I like the idea of trying it. I mean, it really can't hurt anything to try it and see what happens.
This does seem like a place where it would work,
Yeah, I agree. I think that it could definitely work. So I would definitely try it. I love the idea of having multiple revenue streams. I think that they will kind of feed off of each other, like you were saying. And yeah, I can't wait to see what happens. I mean, I think that you're onto something really cool.
The thing about Patreon, really, in this case, because you have all you don't have to do much to make it work. Like, you could even just have a simple, you get to listen to all the podcasts a day early. if you support me on Patreon.
So there's one podcast. I'm like obsessed with true crime podcast. So there's one podcast in particular that I support on Patreon, and pretty much the only thing that they do is they release it one day early for people who support them on Patreon, and it's also ad free. So I mean, that's a very simple thing that you can do. Yeah. But you know, for me, it's worth it because they come out every Monday, and like by the time Monday rolls around, I am like freaking out because I want the podcast to come out so bad. So for me, it's worth it because I get it that one extra day early.
Yeah, and you could even do something like, especially I feel like you're thinking this is more the parent angle. Like that's what it sounds like when you're talking about this. Like, would the parents be more likely to support you on Patreon than to say buy the thing, right?
Yeah.
Like so you could do, hey, you love listening with your kid on the thing. Well, guess what? There's an ad-free version on Patreon, right? You get to listen to the ad-free version a day early, and then maybe you just record one bonus episode a month, right? That's really geared toward that thing that they like that you get to say in front of your kids. You know what I'm saying? So like maybe there is that bonus episode. Like you could even call it the kids in the car episode. Like that's like you've specifically made this thing for them to listen with their kids in the car. You know, you know, like a sneak attack on their kid for wisdom, right? You know what I mean? And they're like, but like that's all you got to do. It's not any extra work at all. You just, you know, have someone edit the commercials in one episode, out the other, and you just post it in different places. And people are more than willing to pay for that stuff. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like the stealth learning podcast.
It is. And and again, that's another fake ad. It's not a fake ad, but it's another ad spot that you could even go ahead and implement right now. Like your next podcast could have Primary Music on Fire in the middle. Don't forget to support us on Patreon at the end. And then you're already ready to show advertisers, hey, I've got multiple ad slots here for you.
Yeah, brilliant.
All right, Mark, it has been a really fun conversation with you today, and we're really, really excited to see where this thing goes to next. But before we go, we always ask our guest, what is one thing that you plan to take action on in the next day or so based on what we talked about here today?
I think the thing I'm going to do straight away is actually segment down the ideas of how I can make the advertising work, how I can put the pitches in place using what I already have. And then I think of that as that sort of next professional level in terms of how I can then grow that going forward. I think that's going to be great advice and something that's going to work really well.
You could also do kind of there's a strategy out there called the Dream 100 strategy. Like if you just sat down one day and were thinking about it, like who are the 100 perfect sponsors? You may not get to 100. You may only think of 20, right? But like, think of the 100 perfect sponsors for your audience and your topic. Write all those people down and then start reaching out to them and see, you know, if you land 4 of those 100 perfect sponsors that you've identified as perfect for your brand, that way you can pitch them exactly like they need to be pitched to realize they're perfect for your brand. If you land 3 or 4 of them, you basically 4x your business overnight. And all you've got to do is put in a little bit of legwork to reach out to them, and you're good to go. Now, if you've got the platform ready when you reach out to them, you can say, hey, I've got a spot at the 10-minute mark that I'm using right now, but I would love to plug you in there. It's $1,000 a month. It's $2,000 a month. It's whatever it is a month. Then you're ready to roll, and you're going to be able to knock those sponsors out really quick too. So that might even be something you could do next level once you figure that out. Like, who are the 100 perfect sponsors for this podcast? I'm going to reach out to every single one of them.
Yeah, absolutely love it. I think that's a great idea.
All right, man. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming back on the show, Mark. Man, it was good to catch up with you. We haven't talked in a little while. Haven't seen you since Flip Your Life Live, so it was great to hear your voice again. And, man, thanks for sharing your success and sharing your transparency and sharing the fact that it takes a long time to become an overnight success. And, man, just keep going because I think you've stumbled into something that has unlimited potential if you just keep pushing it.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I thanks again to the community for everything they do and supporting inside there. And my lasting memory of Nashville, I think the first time I saw you, I was on my way back to my room. We were just walking along the corridor and you're like, hey, Mark, and gave me a big hug. And I was like, I'm in a community that I love here. This is fantastic.
I'm a hugger, Mark. I'm a hugger, man. You know what I'm saying?
We're very happy to have you as a part of it.
Oh, it's very kind of you. Thanks so much.
All right, guys, what another great discussion with Flip Your Life community member Mark Taylor. Man, he is doing great things. He's taking massive action and he's building a business that he loves. And we want you to do the same thing. And the best way that you can take your online dreams to the next level is to join me and Jocelyn at Flip Your Life Live in Lexington, Kentucky this September. Maybe you will run into me in the hallway and I can give you a hug too. We would love to see you there. It's an amazing event. We are right now starting our weekly prerequisite trainings. We train our members on how to get the most out of this live event. Nobody else, no other business conference does this. You're going to get weekly training, weekly accountability with us so that we can help you be prepared to take advantage of Flip Your Life Live and then take your life and business to the next level after the event. You can learn more about Flip Your Life Live 2019 at flippedlifestyle.com/live. That is FLIPPEDLIFE style STYLE.com/live. Go to flippedlifestyle.com/live to see if there are any tickets left. We are almost sold out of the event. So you want to make sure you go there today, you secure your spot, and we will see you in Lexington, Kentucky this September. All right, guys, that is all the time we have for this week. Thanks for listening. Until next time, get out there, take action, do whatever it takes. Flip your life. We'll see you then.
Bye.
All right, sorry about that, man. This morning, I lifted weights yesterday, and I was squatting, and a bar fell on my neck.
Oh gosh!
Yeah, I didn't think nothing of it when it happened in the weight room, but then about 5 o'clock this morning, I woke up and I was just in ridiculous pain. Like my whole back and neck had just swollen. Like I had big puffy swelling on my traps and my neck, and I was like, oh my gosh! And my neck was hurting so bad. This morning I had to go to my primary care person and do some x-rays just to check it out, make sure I didn't break my neck. So, but
luckily okay.
So far, yeah, the x-rays seem to be negative, and right now I'm just in terrible pain. So, you know what though? I'm a podcaster. This is what we do. We're going to roll through. Okay. All right. Yeah. That's a lesson for all the kids out there.
Don't exercise.
Don't exercise.
Exercise.
I was going to go with persevere. But whatever.
It's overrated. Exercise. You heard it here first, people.